It feels like one of my school reports, this, because, all my school reports said, if only he concentrated, if only he didn't stop talking and listening to Human League records when he should be doing his revision.
Today we're talking about Cerebrum, which is a new sci-fi horror starring Steve Oram, who we love here on Boys on Film. Look who it is, it's Chris, and my name is Phil. And another horror. Well, it's kind of sci-fi horror, isn't it?
It is. I think that's the right way to describe it, actually. Yeah, it's neither one nor the other. It's a bit of both, and that makes it quite intriguing, I think, from the off. It's an interesting premise, isn't it?
Directed and written by Sebastien Blanc. I'd never heard of him as a filmmaker. It stars Tobi King Bakare, who was in I May Destroy You, which I loved. Did you see that series?
Yeah, absolutely. Loved it. Brilliant.
Yeah, really good. And also stars, who we love, like I said on the intro, Steve Oram, or Oram, never know how to pronounce his name. I always say Oram.
Those two performances are great in this film. I mean, I think they're both brilliant actors. They've got very different roles to play. The son has been through a sort of terrible trauma and is kind of is recovering from that, and there's some flashbacks to before, and his recovery kind of happens as well. And he goes on a real journey, actually, and he acts his way through that incredibly well, incredibly solidly. And his father, Steve Oram, absolutely. I mean, he just plays characters really well. I enjoy his performances where there's a kind of normality, but there's actually something really grim happening underneath, which is what's going on here.
I was thinking that when I was watching it, because he's so normal, and he kind of delivers the role in a really, I don't know, human way, but you just know that there's something dark about his character, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is. And he's done that before. I mean, we've seen him in so many kind of horror-tinged, films before. I mean, Sightseers was brilliant. He was so good in that. Have you seen it? Yeah. And it's kind of like that comedic, dark comedy edge. It's a lot of the alternative comedy actors get into those horror roles, and again, he's done it here.
I think he plays it brilliantly because he's just Mr. Ordinary. He looks so ordinary. He's wearing Manette C&A clothes. He drives a VW Golf that's silver.
That's a cultural reference for the kids, isn't it? Manette C&A.
No one's going to know what I'm talking about. But
everybody will be like, what? What's that?
Just Google it, kids. It's called fashion. It was never called fashion. But he's just this ordinary guy who ostensibly is trying to do the best for his family after this traumatic event, but he's tipped the wrong way. He's taken this and got really obsessed with it, and he just goes down this path that starts to reveal itself, that's just terrifying, that's just really scary and morbid and horrible. And he just plays that brilliantly because he's completely deadpan throughout the whole thing. When he's being exposed, he's just very like, look, I'm just trying to do the best for my family. It's like, well, yeah, but there are other ways to do it, Steve.
And I would imagine it's quite a difficult role to play because it's all about trying to act in a normal way, but in, obviously a character that's terrified and unsettled and uneasy. And there is a tendency, I think, if you're an actor, you don't want to overstep that mark and make it hammy, and he doesn't make it hammy because it's believable, because that he's terrified. But obviously he's got to do those facial expressions of someone who is genuinely scared, which I think is quite a difficult role. And he's obviously a very good actor, a very fine actor, as is Steve Oram. He's kind of underplaying the role a little bit in a way, because like you say, he's a normal character, but that something's wrong. And obviously, William's character, Toby's role is someone that's recuperating at home, and he's obviously unaware. He doesn't know where his mother is, and his mother obviously was part of the accident. But yeah, I have to say, I wasn't that surprised by where the story went. There was a reveal probably halfway through, and I knew that it was coming. So I don't think, plot wise, I think it was quite predictable.
I'd agree with you there. I think we all knew what was coming, unfortunately, and sometimes it's better to try and keep the mystery about you for a bit longer. And unfortunately, it got revealed a bit soon, which then means that you, as a viewer, you kind of you step back a bit, I think, in a film like this, and you start to just think, oh, okay, just get on with it then, because I know what's going to happen, so just get me there. And there's an element of that, so it feels a bit slow paced because of that, because you kind of work it out a bit early, and because it's given to you a bit early. really, to be honest. So you kind of work it out. I mean, I think it's a nicely made film. I think within the first few seconds, I was saying, this looks really good. I think, again, no idea what the budget is on this film, but I think it was spent well. I think it's been put together beautifully. It looks really good in the most part, and the location's really well chosen, and the actors are really good, and it looks really, really good. But something about the plot and the kind of editing just is a bit kind of not as tight as it could be. Basically, it could have been
I think the main problems for me are pacing. I think it had pacing issues. I don't mind a slow burn. I love films that are slow if they deliver, and I think with the delivery of this, I kind of expected it, so that spoilt it a little bit for me. I think the performances were good, and I think it's an interesting idea. I think it was well directed. I don't know. I just wonder if seeing Williams' character pre-accident earlier on would have made us care more for the characters. I didn't feel like I cared for them as much, because at the beginning of the film, without spoiling anything, it kind of shows what happened after the accident, and then halfway through you get the backstory. And obviously post-accident he's not speaking, so it's all about his facial expressions, and I didn't really know much about him, or I didn't feel like I knew much about Williams' character. His father more so, but obviously there's that intrigue there with Steve Oram's character. But yeah, I just wonder if more of that backstory at the beginning. I mean, I guess it's kind of interesting to have it that way round, because it's not like the normal way that filmmakers would play out a story, I guess, and it's more intricate, I suppose, doing it that way.
But you're right. I think the intrigue isn't quite enough to engage you. The clues that you're given are fairly explicit, and it's always slightly better when those clues don't make a lot of sense sometimes, or you really get thinking about those clues. But I don't want to spoil it, but you get some flashes from the very first scenes of the film that actually are big clues as to what happened, what the trauma was. In the space of a flash, you get it, and if there was a bit more mystery about those, and I think that could have been a shot off something else, that would absolutely have given you a clue in a slightly different way. That meant that it then felt very slow paced, because as we both expressed, I think you get enough clues to sort of work it out, which means you're then just sitting and waiting for it to happen.
Exactly.
In a way that in the more successful suspenseful films, you just have got the pieces and you just can't make sense of them, and that's why you engage and that's why you keep watching. This was a bit more delivered to us on a plate, and therefore was less of a challenge, and therefore was less engaging, which meant it just felt slower for me.
Absolutely, and it was that made me feel quite twitchy. I became restless because I was frustrated, because there wasn't much challenging me as a viewer. No. It was almost like I was existing through a movie rather than experiencing it. Do you know what I mean? I just felt like I was waiting for something to happen. I kind of knew what was happening most of the way along.
I've got to say that the sort of last 15 minutes just felt like it could have been 5. I think when it gets to payoff, I don't like a payoff that just goes on and on and on. I prefer a more succinct payoff, and I think because you already knew what the payoff was going to be as a viewer, when you get there, there is a sort of, okay, fine, just give me the end then, and you're just waiting for it, really.
For a sci-fi horror, there were relatively, I don't know, minimal effects, I guess. There was some really impactful effects that I thought worked, but kind of Doctor Who-like in a way, if you know what I mean. That might be down to the budget, though.
It was a bit too referential, that, for me. It could have been slightly more creative way to deal with that.
Do you think it had a David Cronenberg feel about it? I think there's some trippy elements in there that made me feel like maybe the director was inspired by David Cronenberg and wanted it to have that feel, and it did have that feel. I mean, it had a sense of unease throughout it.
It did, and it had there was tension in there. I think the tension was palpable. It was there, and I think it's right to describe this as a sci-fi horror. It kind of is both of those, and I think that's what Cronenberg did really well. And you can see that this is in that school, it's from that place, and I think that's a really interesting place to take this genre, to rather than just be constantly trying to make horror more and more graphic or more and more scary or more jumpy. Let's kind of blend it with something else. Let's blend it with kind of sci-fi and stuff, and I think that's a really interesting place to go, and I think it's really noble to go that way. I just think that you've got to kind of see it through if you're going to start doing that, and it didn't quite see it through for me, I'm afraid.
So, verdict time. Boys on Film star rating from Chris, first of all.
I am not in a big hurry to see this again. So, it kind of, which is always a big marker for me. I think if I want to see something again because it kind of piqued my interest and I want to see some more if I watch it again, I'm really interested. So I'm going to go 2 out of 5.
Wow. Great minds think alike. I thought you were going to go higher.
Why do you think I was going to go higher?
I don't know. I just assumed that you enjoyed it more than I did. I became really restless and frustrated by it, even though I could see the potential.
Yeah, exactly. I think it feels like one of my school reports. This because all my school reports said if only he concentrated, if only he didn't stop talking and listen to Human League records when he should be doing his revision. If only the potential could be seen through. And I'm afraid I've got to say that about this film. It promised a lot, and I was excited about it. And I can see what they were trying to do, and I really, really respect what they were trying to do. But it just didn't quite get there for me. It just wasn't enough, to be honest.
Yeah, same here. And I think I disliked it more than I liked it. But there were, obviously parts of the film I loved, and I loved the performances. But I'm the same. Wasn't enough for me. So it's 2 for me as well. It's called Cerebrum. It's directed and written by Sebastien Blanc, and it's out now on digital platforms. So if you think you might be interested in it, go and watch it and leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of it. And if you think you might enjoy that film that we've just reviewed, check out the film that's on the screen now, floating around near Chris's head somewhere. And don't forget to subscribe, because we will be back for more, talking about other stuff. Horror films, probably, more than likely.
We love horror films.
We do. And we love dancing like the Human League girls. That's for another video, maybe.